The biggest shift in global energy markets is flying under the radar. Right now, a seismic realignment is taking place as China slashes U.S. oil imports by a staggering 90% and halts U.S. LNG purchases altogether. Meanwhile, Canadian oil producers are enjoying an unprecedented windfall as Beijing frantically redirects billions in energy investment northward. This isn't just business, it's geopolitical chess at the highest level, with Donald Trump and Chinese leaders locked in a high-stakes game in which energy flows are being weaponized. The ripple effects could rewrite the global energy map for decades to come, affecting prices at your local gas pump and reshaping international alliances in ways few saw coming. Escalating trade war reshapes global energy routes. The US-China trade war has escalated dramatically since 2022, expanding far beyond its initial focus on technology and agricultural products to include the energy sector. What began as targeted tariffs has morphed into a full-blown economic conflict, affecting multiple industries. Trump's America First policies have resulted in broad tariffs on Chinese goods, and Beijing is countering with strategic restrictions on US exports. The impact on global energy flows has been immediate and significant. China has cut its oil purchases from the United States by around 90% and virtually eliminated imports of US liquefied natural gas. This radical shift represents a deliberate Chinese strategy to use energy purchases as a retaliatory tool against US trade policy. Chinese SOEs and refiners have reportedly received unofficial instructions to avoid providing revenue to unfriendly countries, effectively blacklisting US energy imports. The timing couldn't be more significant. This comes just as the US is positioning itself as an emerging energy export powerhouse following the shale revolution that has dramatically increased American oil and gas production capacity. Canada becomes China's alternative energy partner of choice. As Beijing continues to distance itself from US energy imports, Canada has emerged as a major beneficiary of this geopolitical shift. Chinese crude oil imports from Canada have reached historic highs, with Chinese companies nearly doubling their Canadian oil purchases in recent months. This surge represents a calculated pivot toward Canadian energy resources, particularly heavy crude from the Western Canadian Sedimentary Basin. Chinese refiners and state-backed energy conglomerates increasingly see Canada as a more politically reliable supplier than the volatile US relationship. This perception of reduced political risk, combined with favorable pricing structures for Canadian heavy crude, has accelerated China's energy partnership with Canada. Beijing is actively negotiating medium-term supply guarantees with Canadian producers and supporting infrastructure developments to facilitate exports to Asian markets. These initiatives include the expansion of terminals, tank farms, and pipeline networks on Canada's Pacific coast. Despite the logistical challenges posed by Canada's limited West Coast export infrastructure and the technical requirements for processing heavy Canadian crude, China appears committed to this strategic realignment of its energy supply chain. This deepening energy relationship also signals a warming of overall Sino-Canadian relations, which had previously been strained by issues such as Canada's restrictions on Huawei technology. Despite their different political systems and historical tensions, a shared interest in countering US trade pressure has created space for pragmatic cooperation between Beijing and Ottawa. Before we dive in, do us a solid, hit that like and subscribe button. It keeps Globelines going strong and helps us connect with more informed viewers like you. With that out of the way, let's move on to our next part. Russia and Middle East fill China's energy gap. Beyond Canada, China is strengthening energy ties with Russia as part of its strategy to reduce US dependence. Chinese refiners are buying Russian Urals and ESPO, Eastern Siberia Pacific Ocean, crude at deep discounts of $10 to $15 per barrel, taking advantage of Western sanctions against Moscow following the Ukraine crisis. This arrangement creates a mutually beneficial situation. Russia gains a reliable customer for oil that Western markets have shunned, while China secures energy supplies at preferential rates. The accelerated energy partnership between Beijing and Moscow represents another dimension of China's multi-alternative supply chain strategy. At the same time, China is pursuing increased LNG imports from Russia, Qatar, and other producers to replace US supplies. Beijing has even begun to mend fences with Australia to secure additional energy resources, demonstrating the pragmatic flexibility of Chinese energy sourcing strategies. By diversifying its energy sources across multiple suppliers, including Russia, Middle Eastern producers, Canada, and potentially Australia, China is not only reacting to immediate trade tensions with the US, but also building resilience against future supply disruptions or political pressure. This multi-vector approach enhances Chinese energy security and undermines U.S. efforts to leverage its new energy export capacity. U.S. energy exporters face significant market disruption and uncertain future. The loss of the Chinese market is a major blow to U.S. energy exporters, particularly those focused on crude oil and LNG. According to the U.S. Energy Information Administration, U.S. crude oil exports had reached about 3 million barrels per day by 2022, with China being a major destination. The 90% reduction in Chinese purchases represents a loss of hundreds of thousands of barrels per day in export volume. U.S. LNG producers have been forced to either divert shipments originally destined for China or cancel contracts altogether. Companies that had invested heavily in expanding U.S. LNG export capacity based on projected Chinese demand now face uncertain returns on their investments. The timing is particularly unfortunate, as these disruptions coincide with the post-pandemic economic recovery and rising global energy demand. U.S. producers are attempting to redirect exports to European and Latin American markets. However, they face intense competition from established suppliers, including Middle Eastern producers, African exporters, and Russian energy companies. The higher transportation costs and logistical challenges associated with these alternative markets further erode the profit margins of U.S. energy companies. Energy industry leaders, particularly in oil-producing regions such as Texas and Louisiana, have expressed frustration with the Trump administration's trade policies, arguing that the loss of Chinese market access outweighs any potential benefits from the broader trade confrontation. The administration, however, has maintained its hardline stance, often characterizing China's trade practices as exploitative and unfair to U.S. interests. Trade war disrupts global energy markets with long-term impact. Ongoing trade tensions between the U.S. and China are fragmenting the global energy market in ways that could last well beyond the immediate conflict. Current projections suggest that the shift in energy flows could continue until at least 2026 to 2027, potentially becoming a permanent feature of the international energy landscape. This fragmentation has significant implications for global energy prices, market stability, and investment patterns. The diversion of energy supplies often involves longer transport distances and higher logistics costs, contributing to market inefficiencies and potentially higher consumer prices. The unpredictability created by politically motivated trade barriers complicates long-term energy infrastructure investment decisions. The situation creates a paradoxical lose-lose dynamic in which rising energy prices harm both Chinese consumers and the U.S. economy, while falling prices threaten Russian revenue streams and the viability of U.S. shale producers. This interconnected vulnerability underscores the counterproductive nature of the escalating trade confrontation. Moreover, the energy sector has become increasingly politicized, with supply relationships now subject to diplomatic calculations rather than purely commercial considerations. Canadian energy companies are caught between their traditional alliance with the United States and the lucrative opportunities presented by the Chinese market. Similarly, European buyers must balance energy security against complex geopolitical considerations when sourcing U.S. or alternative LNG. The resulting uncertainty is rippling through global supply chains, disrupting established business relationships and forcing market participants to recalibrate their strategies against a backdrop of heightened political risk. This environment of persistent unpredictability undermines the efficiency of global energy markets and threatens the stability that has historically underpinned global economic growth. Final verdict: the trade war is permanently reshaping the world's energy landscapes. As we've explored the massive shift in global energy markets, you may be wondering, who will ultimately win this high-stakes game? Will U.S. energy companies regain their lost market share in China? Or has this relationship been changed forever? Could Canada emerge as a new energy superpower as it strengthens ties with both China and traditional Western allies? And perhaps most importantly, how could these shifting energy alliances affect global politics, climate goals, and your own energy costs in the coming years? The answers will unfold in the months and years ahead, but one thing is certain: the global energy chessboard has been dramatically reshuffled. If you found this analysis valuable, drop your thoughts in the comments and hit the like button and subscribe for more in-depth coverage of the geopolitical and economic forces reshaping our world. Thanks for watching. Until next time, stay informed and keep your insights sharp. You can watch any of the videos on the screen now, there's plenty more to dive into.